The virtue of justice is the most important of all ethical virtues, Aristotle names. He dedicates the entire fifth book of his Nicomachean Ethics to this virtue. In this video, you will find out what Aristotle means by justice and why this virtue occupies a special position among the ethical virtues. For Aristotle, the virtue of justice plays a decisive role in human coexistence. Justice is the most important of all ethical virtues because it is explicitly related to dealing with other people, the community. As we know, Aristotle defines man as a zoon politikon, a political or social being who lives in community with other people. In order to lead a virtuous life in community, more precisely the polis, man needs justice. In a general sense, justice means the full possession of all ethical virtues. At the same time, justice also means law-abidingness, that is, respect for the law, and thus for what is morally and legally required. According to the view of the time, good law encourages citizens to be virtuous, that is, brave, prudent, generous, etc. This virtue does not serve the individual, but the good of the community. In a special sense, however, justice, like the other ethical virtues, is a single virtue, which is defined as the golden mean between two wrong extremes. Justice always concerns questions of giving and taking, distribution and correction. There can be too much and too little. Justice is also about finding the right balance. This virtue is needed in political life. Justice is the right balance between too little and too much. You can see what types of justice Aristotle distinguishes in this diagram. First of all, there is a distinction between justice in the general and in the special sense. Complete or general justice, in later terminology, Justitia Universalis, refers to the possession of all ethical virtues. Justice can therefore be the general term for all virtues. In this sense, justice can also mean law-abidingness. In antiquity, laws served to enable citizens to lead a virtuous life. Aristotle, however, is more interested in justice in a special sense, Justitia Particularis, or particular justice. This is now a specific Aristotelian ethical virtue. Like the other ethical virtues, this virtue develops through habituation. The Dianoetic virtue of practical wisdom is transformed into the virtue of justice through habituation to the right action, striking the right balance between two wrong extremes. Partial justice can be further subdivided into commutative justice and distributive justice. Commutative justice refers to dealings between individuals, and here, either to voluntary interactions or to involuntary interactions. Voluntary interactions include all voluntary agreements between persons, that is, purchase, sale, loan, rent, and so on. This area is regulated by our civil law today. Involuntary interactions include secret or open offenses, that is, theft, robbery, defamation, assault, and even murder. Our criminal law deals with this area today. In relation to involuntary interactions, today we also speak of justitia correctiva, or corrective justice. The right balance must be struck between the interacting parties in all these areas. There must be neither too much nor too little. Neither in voluntary nor in involuntary interactions should one of the parties involved have an unjustified advantage or disadvantage. In voluntary interactions, the value of a service may neither exceed nor fall short of the value of the consideration. In involuntary interactions, a balance must be found between the offender and the victim. If the offender causes harm to the victim, this harm must be compensated. Of course, it is best if such unjustified advantages or disadvantages do not arise in the first place. The virtue of commutative justice can therefore also serve to prevent an imbalance between the individual affected parties in advance. However, once such an imbalance has arisen between the individual parties concerned, this imbalance must be corrected. Commutative justice is therefore above all the virtue of a judge. He must restore the right balance between too much and too little. Aristotle also describes this state as a state of equality. However, equality doesn't mean that all people should receive the same amount, but rather that the same must be exchanged for the same, or that the same must be rewarded with the same. Equality in this context means that the same rules apply to everyone, that the principle of equality applies. This means that performance or damage corresponds directly to the consideration or compensation. In voluntary interactions, this means that goods cost the same for everyone, regardless of worthiness, neediness, rank, performance, etc. The same must be exchanged for the same. In involuntary interactions, the principle of equality means that a balance must be found between the unlawful advantage of the perpetrator and the disadvantage of the victim, for example, through the repayment of a stolen item, compensation for pain and suffering, or similar. It is about restoring the original state. Aristotle also speaks here of arithmetic proportionality. The initial state is defined as equality, and this right center must be restored by compensating for too much or too little. A state of arithmetical equality should be restored or maintained. The second major area of justice is the area of distributive justice. This area concerns the distribution of public goods, especially honor and money. In this area of justice, too, the right balance must be struck between too much and too little. According to Aristotle, honor and money should be distributed according to the merit of the citizens. Merit can be the service rendered or the virtue shown. This virtue of distributive justice can be demonstrated by the actors themselves by not giving themselves more than they deserve. Above all, however, it is a virtue of rulers, of politicians, who distribute public goods according to the merit of their citizens and have to strike the right balance between too much and too little. Aristotle also describes this form of justice as a form of equality. However, as before, it does not mean that all people should receive the same, but that people with the same merit should receive the same amount. Here, Aristotle speaks of geometric proportionality. The goods allocated to the people concerned must be proportional to the merits of these people. Those who perform well or are very virtuous therefore earn more than others. Aristotle's systematization of the concept of justice has had an enormous influence throughout the history of philosophy. Justice generally means virtue in a comprehensive sense, namely the possession of all ethical virtues. Justice as an individual ethical virtue is the ability to act and judge fairly, for example, as a citizen, judge, or politician. Commutative and distributive justice, like all ethical virtues, is about striking the right balance between too much and too little. Commutative justice aims to establish arithmetic proportionality, whereas distributive justice aims to establish geometric proportionality. Justice is the most important of all ethical virtues, as it is essential for living together in the polis, and thus also for a good and virtuous life in the political way of life.